everybody to Inside Boxing Daily on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Inside Boxing Daily is brought to you by MyBookie.ag, where you can go to MyBookie.ag and use the promo code TGT100 to get up to 100% cash back bonus up to your first $300 deposited. Also, the Retired Boxers Foundation, Jackie Richardson, Alex Ramos, make sure you check them out. And I am your co-host, Mike Goodpasser. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my other co-host, Jeremiah Pricer. How you doing, Jeremiah?
Very, very good, Mike. Let's get this thing going, man.
You know, that was really creepy the way you said that. It kind of took me back to them days where you'd start off with, like, welcome or something, and it just creeped me out.
Yeah, well, whatever I can do to get under your skin, you know.
Okay. That's good. I mean, a lot of people are like that. WBC heavyweight champion Deontay Wilder is heading towards a rematch against Luis King Kong Ortiz in September on PBC at the Staples Center, according to the Los Angeles Times. The news puts a damper, I think, on a hoped-for unification fight between Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder for November or December. What's your take here? Are you good with this? Because I'm not, because I would like to see the Joshua and Wilder fight, or Wilder and Fury, or Joshua and Fury, or David Hasselhoff and Scott Baio.
Yeah, no, especially the last on that list.
Yeah, that would have been a classic fight. But
yeah,
it's one of those fights that, like Wilder and Joshua, if they wait too long, it'll just keep marinating. And then, you know, Joni Loves Shotzi failed. Scott Baio dropped out of the limelight. Then it's just David Hasselhoff. So I'm just worried Deontay Wilder could be Scott Baio here and miss the boat.
Yeah, it seems like we're getting there, man. I mean, it feels like it's about to leave the dock. But, yeah, man, it's I don't need to see this. I mean, it just seems like it's going to go even worse than the first. I mean, the first was a competitive fight. It wasn't as good as a lot of people had. And a lot of people thought that was a damn good fight. And, you know, just because there's drama
I'll give you this. This is how I tell if it's a good fight or not. And we've done this before. If I watch it back and I'm about asleep by the third round, number one, that's normal for me. But number two, it's just not a very good fight. And it's not because I don't like Wilder, because Joshua and Klitschko to me, if I try to watch that to this day through the first 4 rounds, I'm dozing. I mean, to me, a dramatic fight is a fight that is great when I see it live, but it's not something I want to watch later. I could watch Ali and Frazier 1 and 3, or Duran Leonard, or Hagler Hearns as many times as I want. I can't do that with almost any fight that's done nowadays.
Yeah, no, except, I mean, to Dominic Brazil's credit, I think his fight with Uguna was pretty good. But then again, you know, using your standard, I haven't watched it again. I haven't watched Klitschko Fury again. I don't know if anybody has watched Fury Klitschko more than once.
No. I think live I fell asleep about the 5th round and woke up for the last round.
Well, and part of my criteria is you know, whether or not it you know, it has some excitement if the volume is turned down low. You know what I mean? Because the thing about like Klitschko and Joshua to me is that
helped.
Yeah, exactly. The crowd really helped push that along because, like you said, a lot of it was just poking and prodding and, you know, them just kind of trying to, you know, fill each other out for the first 4 rounds. And that's kind of what you got for Fury and, Wilder and Ortiz as well. But, I mean, given what, you know, the action that first fight did provide, I don't expect that the second fight is going to get anything like that. I mean, you know, Ortiz just hasn't looked that good lately. I mean, he's, you know, just an old guy at this point, and it sucks, you know, for his part a little bit because he didn't really even get going near the world class level until he was on the plus side of 35.
Yeah, and the case could be made that he hasn't even fought a guy that was world class level, has he?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Besides Brian Jennings,
come on, Brian Jennings is not that good.
Well, yeah, he hasn't turned out to be that good, but he is a good heavyweight. I mean, again, there's
he's
just
a good heavyweight for today.
He is a good heavyweight for today. I mean, he did have a good performance against Klitschko himself, so it's not as if he was,
Well, come
like
on. A good performance, or he just won 2 more rounds than most people did? Because that was probably a
he
9 to
didn't get
3
knocked
fight at
out.
best. Yeah, that's what I mean. He didn't get knocked out.
Yeah, but
So
he
the
wasn't.
closest thing, and it was an old Fury or old Klitschko, who a few months later fights Fury and did absolutely nothing.
Well,
So
if we're
come on.
listen, he wasn't getting, he wasn't getting knocked around the ring like a lot of their opponents do. It was a competitive performance, but I mean, Ortiz did beat him, and I got to give him credit because he went out and whooped his ass. But that's the thing is, right now, really just focusing on the fight itself, Ortiz is just an older version of himself. He's not as sharp. He's a little bit flabbier. And Wilder is probably a little bit better than he was in the first fight.
Well,
So
how about this? He's going to be better just because of this. He fought Fury.
right. Yeah, he
That's going
fought
to make
Fury.
him better.
Exactly. I mean, so again, Wilder's better. Ortiz is worse. I just expect, and not only that, I think Wilder, because of the result in the first fight, is going to be more confident than he was in the first go round. He's going to be a little bit more familiar. I mean, you got to be. I mean, he was an amateur, and funny enough, Wilder did go to the Olympics, but he hasn't seen a lot of southpaws in his career. But I think after familiarizing himself a little bit with Ortiz's style. He's going to be a bit more confident because of that as well. And so I think he's just going to be aggressive and try to get him out of there. Of course, with heavyweights, you never know. Wilder might get sloppy because I think, that's coming too. He might get sloppy and he might get knocked out, but I'm going to go with conventional wisdom here and favor, an early Wilder stoppage.
All right, we have a question about this fight. Let me pull it up here. I just thought it was on, and then it had to reset me. But it's from Hamed. Got a question. What makes Ortiz Wilder 2 worse? It's on pay-per-view. Is it on paper? Is it going to be on pay-per-view?
Fuck, is it?
Shit.
I know. Yeah, I know it was just announced, but I haven't.
Yeah, and as Hamed said. If it's on pay-per-view, it's worse. And Ortiz hasn't done much since he looked bad against Hammer.
Well, yeah, I mean that was his most recent outing, but Ortiz to me he's been on a steady decline for probably years now.
I don't think there's any way they're gonna put this on pay-per-view, though. Do you?
No, I really hope not. I mean, it wouldn't make much sense. It wouldn't make much sense to do that at all. I mean, you're not even selling that well against Fury, who's a much bigger sell. So I don't think that makes any sense at all. But especially for the fans, because obviously Wilder's not that caliber of fighter. It's like a lot of these heavyweights. Really, you have to put them in against one another for it to be a pay-per-view type event. And again, I don't even think. I wouldn't even go that far. I don't pay for any of these guys, no matter who they're fighting. But yeah, one of these 3 top guys have to fight each other for it to be considered a pay-per-view event, and this just isn't it. Ortiz Wilder certainly isn't, especially with I think me echoing the conventional wisdom that Wilder's probably going to have a better performance and get Ortiz out of there quicker. But I'm just not that intrigued by. I'm not intrigued by the prospect of this being a rematch at all, let alone what it does and where it lands.
Yeah, and then we've got James at the mic who says can't see Ortiz last more than 5 rounds based on how rapidly he's deteriorating over the last few fights. Looked terrible versus Dave Allen and Scott. It was then KO by Wilder, and now looking worse than ever. Completely pointless rematch. Hopefully the WBC will order White versus Wilder. I don't think there's a chance in hell that that's ever going to happen, no. Especially since he technically just fought his mandatory in Brazil.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's in look at what are we dealing with here? I mean, maybe one of you guys, and thanks for chiming in, by the way. I really, really appreciate it. So, shout out to Hamed, who's contributed a number of times, and James himself.
I appreciate it too, Hamed. I know that, Jeremiah likes to make me look bad all the time, like shitty comments like that. But go ahead, Jeremiah.
Yeah, but we appreciate it. But yeah, that's the thing is nobody needs to see the rematch. It is pointless. But as he pointed out, Wilder he just technically took on his mandatory, and Wilder has taken on what, 2 or 3 mandatories in his entire reign, if you want to call it that. Yeah, so I mean, I honestly don't know. I know Eddie Hearn, I think today it came out, or maybe it was yesterday, Eddie Hearn was saying that he's going to really try to get White that fight. But I've also heard rumors, and I haven't looked into it enough to verify because I'm just not that kind of guy to really, just devote my time to, things that could possibly be gossip. But I heard that Deontay Wilder told Dillian White that he was going to wait at least 3 years before he got a shot. So I don't know if there's any truth to that. But that's the thing is he just fought his mandatory. So, here's Ortiz. This is a voluntary defense. I mean, it would be great to see the WBC, force his hand. But honestly, we also have to acknowledge the politics of the situation, as we always do here. Al Heyman and the WBC are tight. Just as Don King and the WBC tight were many, many years ago. So the WBC is not making these rulings based on their own feelings. They're doing it based on Al Heyman's whims. And with that, Al Heyman and Deontay Wilder, they need to protect themselves and try to get as much cash out of this as they can. And to do that, they have to wait for a Fury rematch or an Anthony Joshua fight.
All right. Also, another heavyweight fight that could happen. Eddie Hearn is sounding highly optimistic that the WBC will make the Tyson Fury versus Dillian White fight for the interim WBC heavyweight world title. An interim world title. Now, if everything I just said makes sense to you, smack yourself in the fucking mouth. All right. Now, Tyson Fury said that he will take this fight if the WBC Diamond title is on the line. Now, if you get excited because the Diamond title is on the line, smack yourself in the fucking mouth. And Hearns has subsequently written to the WBC to relay the news about Fury agreeing to fight White. Number one, if I'm Fury, why would I fight White at all? And is that Diamond belt really that fucking awesome?
No, but it seems like these alphabet soup organizations, are able to get people on board just enough because really when you look at the media and boxing, it's, by and large places like Boxing Scene that are pushing it out. And don't get me wrong, there's some good guys who write for the Boxing Scene, but this is also about, pushing fights and getting them hyped up for them. And they're always taking small quotes out of interviews and blowing them up into articles, and people are getting worked up about them. But it just sucks that the WBA regular title and interim title and all these bullshit titles that they keep creating just to milk guys of sanctioning fees. They've made their way into the boxing psyche, and some guys just put too much emphasis on them. The Diamond belt itself, I guess, is meant to signify that it's a special event or something. I don't exactly know. I'm not sure the WBC knows. They kind of just make things up as they go. But yeah, the interim belt is an even bigger joke. I mean, what does it matter if an interim title or a Diamond title is at stake here? Because they're not the title. Then again, the WBC isn't the title either. But yeah, I mean, the interim makes absolutely no sense. We've talked about it before. Interim, we can follow that and get behind that if...
Well, how about this? Because this gets more complicated as I read what Eddie Hearn said. Eddie Hearn actually says that White will fight Oscar Rivas to become the mandatory title. And then since Deontay Wilder is probably going to fight Konatsky in November or December, then Tyson Fury would fight Dillian White. And then Anthony Joshua would fight Manuel Charv to be king of Germany. And I think this demonstration belt is up for grabs there.
And then Char's fighting Brian.
Ain't he fighting a kendo?
No. So yeah,
Brian fighting a kendo.
Yeah,
He's 75 years old. He needs to get a shot before it's too late.
Yeah, I know. He got that legal ruling in his favor, so he's got to be in the mix somewhere. So honestly, Mike, it doesn't look like we're getting, the Fury, Joshua, and Wilder fighting each other until like 2023 at this point.
I
I mean,
think this, and this is my prediction. I think Fury fights Wilder by the middle of next summer, and then I think by the middle of summer after that, Anthony Joshua will fight one of them.
yeah, again, well, I mean, you're more of a man than I am making these predictions.
That's
I
what
mean,
everybody says too. So,
I, I just, you're like, I hear that a lot too.
yeah, that you only weigh like 170 pounds, and I think we've already established if you're under 200 pounds, you're not really a man.
Yeah, I just,
Have
I
you
just
ever
have,
played soccer?
hell no.
Okay, then you're
No,
all right.
hey, no. Take it easy now, okay? I did play badminton professionally though for a couple of years. That
Well, if you're a
was
professional shuttlecocker, then you've got to be a legit man.
oh yeah, no, undisputed. But yeah,
You're
I
an
mean it's
undisputed shuttlecocker?
the undisputed shuttlecocker champion of the world.
I just like to say shuttlecock.
I like to say, hopefully we get big heavyweight fights because this is bullshit, man. I mean, it's just nonsense. I mean, really, Wilder, I know, has been interviewed too, and I think he had a recent interview where they asked him about the fight, and he just seemed kind of timid about making any real prediction on when something might come off. But he did elaborate, he did reiterate that, that is the plan, that he's getting, that it would be Brazil, that it would be Ortiz, and then it'd be Konaki. And he said maybe he could scuttle his plans with other guys and, take on Anthony Joshua or something. But it's just, I mean, a lot of I don't know exactly what the hell is going on. I mean, it's a lot of posing and posturing, and I don't like the shit at all. I mean, I just want to see these guys get on with it. And I know what they're trying to do. And who knows, maybe Al Heyman is trying to drag it out a little bit so he can make as much off this as possible. Again, there are rumors that he's shopping PBC around to other people. So I don't know if he's getting a lot of pressure put on him.
Well, are they in kind of the same situation as Errol Spence, where just with the side they're on, instead of having, what, Thurman and Pacquiao and Porter, well, he's got Fury, Konachki, and Ortiz. He can milk this, fight 3 fights that are relatively safe before he has to fight Joshua. And now what we've seen is much like Crawford. I think we're starting to see Joshua get a little desperate because he's fighting Andy Ruiz next. And outside of maybe a rematch against Dillian White, unless he can pull in Fury or Wilder now, there's not really much out there for him.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I wouldn't call Fury a relatively safe fight, but I mean, I think it is right that Wilder can fight Ortiz. He'll do decent money for the Ortiz rematch. Konaki will draw some fans because he's a white guy, a white Polish guy, and you put that in New York, and he's going to sell well. And obviously the PBC and Brooklyn, they're doing big business together. And then, the Fury fight would obviously do bigger business than before. So, yeah, I mean, I would like to see all of these guys get a little desperate, but, Fury seems to be marching at the tune of his own beat. Wilder just seems to be, I don't think any of them are scared. We've talked about this in the past too. I don't think any of them are scared. But I do think they're trying to milk this for every penny that they're worth. And again, I don't know if, Al Heyman is doing this because that's the model he's familiar with. I mean, after all, it would make some sense because that's the way Floyd Mayweather, charted his career. I mean, milking things and waiting until the last minute. So maybe that's the business model Al Heyman is going for. Or maybe, he's feeling a little pressure from Waddle and Reed or the investors, and they're like, hey man, you got to get us some money, and he thinks that the eventual Joshua fight will help stop some of the anger. I don't know, man. It's just hard. There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind closed doors that I'm just unaware of. I mean, but just as a fan, I want to see him fight.
We got a question from Hamed again. Got a second question. Why are there so many bad boxing media members and writers based in America? Number one, Hamed, You better not be talking about me. Is it due to boxing being a niche sport? I know he's talking about Ayn Rand Hoffer anyways because he works for PBC. Or has boxing declined from the old days something to do with it? I think this. I think when you look at overall media in general, whether it's news, football, baseball, basketball, I think it's all degenerated. And I think the main reason it's degenerated, especially with boxing, is, and I made the joke about John, but there are a lot of guys that are in the pocket of the Zone or PBC or Showtime, and when you're calling fights for Showtime, if you're not real, positive about Showtime, your ass is done. And when we look back in the day, Howard Cosell didn't care who the popular guy was. He told you what he saw. Guys like Al Bernstein used to tell you what you saw. Of course, Al doesn't get to, I don't know, Al's still on, but not as much as he used to, it doesn't seem like. And I think the big problem with boxing media is everything is bought and owned, each network, by a certain entity. And that's why we get so much shit out there, Jeremiah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with this. So here's my analysis. And again, I appreciate the comment. Here's the thing is boxing used to be the biggest sport in the U.S. Jack Dempsey was bigger than Babe Ruth. And anybody who studies history, you look at the old newspaper clippings. I mean, you could find multiple clippings. I'm talking about, flyweights and stuff, right? I've studied, some flyweights, and you'll get multiple write-ups that are from the ringside in the local area. So, if this is staged at the Madison Square Garden, you'll have their writer, you'll get one from the Brooklyn Daily Eagle, the Standard Union, and all these other places. Here's the thing is those guys, the people who wrote for the New York Times and, Standard Union and all these places, they had their own personal agenda, sure, just like all of us. We've all got biases, but it's tempered by the fact that the mainstream press, who is not attached to any one of these promotional entities, is writing about it. So you used to have these things saturated in mainstream press, and slowly the sport has become more and more niche. And now what you have is, you do have big places like Yahoo and other big sites. Forbes even writes about boxing. Wall Street Journal had a piece about boxing not long ago. Every once in a while you will have that stuff, but even the people who are part of the publications who are not attached to the Zone or Showtime or any of these other ones, a lot of them are not hardcore fans. They're not guys who have ever been in a gym. It's like Kevin Iole. Kevin Iole is a good writer. I don't want to talk a bunch of crap about him, but he's not a guy who really has been in the game. He just writes about the game. So that's one of the issues too. You have guys who just don't have experience. You've also got guys who are attached, like you said, Mike, where they're getting paid. And a lot of times you can't blame them. I mean, paid gigs in boxing are rare. To actually make a living to write about boxing, we're talking about an elite small percent. Like Dan Raphael. Dan Raphael and Kevin Iole, those guys are rare. So when they get those positions, of course they're going to maintain the party line because you don't want to lose it. If you're making $60,000+ a year, whatever they're making, but I do believe that it's above $60,000. When you're making that amount of money, you're not going to jeopardize your career. Also, a lot of guys who are in the press, they are trying to get jobs like that. And so when DAZN is created and they're trying to fill positions, of course, some boxing guys are going to try to get in there. And again, once they get in there, they're going to toe the party line. Another thing is that you have there's very little members who are trying to dig deep, like get under the nail and get the dirt. You know what I mean? Like Thomas Hauser does when he does his pieces on USADA, for instance, where he evaluates information and tells us that there's only been one catch in the 1,500+ tests that USADA's ever run on boxers. right? There's almost no journalism going on at that point. So that's why the WBC, the WBA, the IBF, all these organizations can run almost unimpeded because nobody is criticizing them in the open. And not only that, some guys don't want to criticize them because they're afraid that their passes will be revoked, so they won't be able to sit ringside and write about it any longer. So there's just tons and tons of bad stuff. And not only that, a lot of guys who write about these things don't go to school for journalism. And that's not to say you can't be a really good writer without going to school, but there are rules that go along with journalism, and there's a refining process that happens when you do go to college for this stuff. So overall, it's just become more of a niche sport. Less and less people have written about it, and almost nobody is doing investigative journalism. It's really in a terrible spot right now.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying there is this: you got guys that are writing for it now that are only writing for it because they're assigned to write for it, where the guys that were writing in the 60s and 70s grew up with boxing being their main love.
Yeah, and exactly. And that's when the power was out of the hands of the sanctioning bodies a bit too, because, again, when the Walker Law passed in New York and standardized the rounds, and then the Ring magazine really came to the forefront of everybody's psyche, and they were pretty much dictating who and who wasn't the champion. There was a lot more clarity back then. I mean, yeah, you'll hear a lot of guys say, oh, well, there were all sorts of belts back then too. Yeah, there were. But again, the Ring magazine helped add clarity to it. People looked to the magazine to figure out who exactly was the man. But now it's just so convoluted anymore. And it's like the Ring magazine. Again, a lot of those guys are good at what they do. They are ethical guys. But ever since they were purchased by Golden Boy, you've had to question some of their motives. And I think even with this DAZN thing, you've got to question some of their motives. Like, why are they giving Naoya Inoue, the Ring Bantamweight Championship of the world by fighting the number 3 guy in,
and the bad thing is this: the farther we get away from the days that we talk about, the more likely we're never going to get back to them again, because this is going to continue to fester itself and to get worse and worse. And as people die off that know what it can be, other people, like Williams, I like William Pounds, he's on the show, but he's on there and he's like, well, if it was just 2 titles, that would be all right. And that's the problem, because anytime you have more than one, it's wrong. You can't do it. There's no such thing as any sport in the world where there's more than one world champion.
Yeah, and I would add Rick Glazer. I think Glazer's a cool dude. He's got a lot of cool stories, but I even asked him, I'm like, well, because he's a proponent of the multi-weight, multi-belt setup. He likes it because he thinks that guys get paid bigger money because of it. And again, I understand that line, but I asked him, I was like, well, how do you expect to make the best fight the best if in boxing's current state? And he's like, oh, well, the TV guys have to push for it. Well, okay, when you have more and more TV entities and more belts, it's awfully hard to twist a guy's arm when they can go somewhere else. Do you know what I mean? It's like with Jarrell Miller, for instance. The WBA said, oh, well, when you come back, you have to sign up for 367 VADA testing and to ever be ranked again. Well, what if he just goes to IBF or WBO or WBC? That's exactly my problem, is there's just too many players in the game and it's all convoluted and it's hard to follow. But yeah, like you said, it's just continuing to fester, and the red lights or the danger signs have been there for many, many years now. I mean, look at amateur boxing. It almost wasn't an Olympic sport, and luckily it still is, but this is what we're bordering on. I mean, I've seen a ton of hardcore boxing fans just give it up or say that I'm not really going to pay attention anymore because there's no clarity.
All right, let's go ahead. Let's move on to the last of our news before we go on this day, and that would be Eddie Hearn, who's been in the news a lot today. Says light heavyweight contender Callum Johnson will probably be fighting former world title challenger Joe Smith Jr. next. That's a fight that Hearn plans on putting together, and it looks like in Great Britain, maybe. So I think me, you, and John all talked about this before. I think this is a great matchup. This is a fight that I would pay to see.
Yeah, definitely. This is a fight you want to put on, the this is one you want to bolster the undercard with of a big fight. I mean, if you had, Anthony Joshua versus Dillian White too, again, I don't want to see that fight. We already know what happens. But if you put this on something like that, I mean, and you put it on pay-per-view, this would get you some more buys. Again, I don't want that model, but yeah, this is a damn good fight. I like it stylistically. I mean, both are really big punchers. Both go and get it. And Smith and Callum Johnson are both, I think they're both ranked guys, or they're very close to it. But yeah, at this stage in their career, I think it's excellent. I mean, Joe Smith Jr. really hasn't been managed all that well. We even said that when he was put up against Sullivan Barrera, and then when he was put up against Bivol. I mean, Callum Johnson is the kind of guy that you need to pair Joe Smith Jr. with, because you're going to get your tickets sold that way. You're going to get entertainment value. People are going to tune in. And yeah, I think it's a damn good fight. And I favor Joe Smith Jr. in this one. He's got a little more experience at the top level. I think he's a bit longer. I think he's slightly bigger. I think he actually hits slightly harder as well. But this is a damn good fight. I mean, I like it. I mean, it does have one of those fight of the year candidate type things written all over it, and hopefully it turns out to be that way.
All right, you want to go ahead and go to On This Day?
Yes, sir. And so this one is probably not a fight that a lot of people are familiar with or have seen, but we're going with Trevor Berbick versus St. Gordon. Berbick was after he had lost his trinket. St. Gordon held a trinket at the time. He was actually the WBC Cruiserweight champ. And St. Gordon was moving up in weight to try his hand at heavyweight, see how that went. And he came in a pretty lean 203 pounds, which is kind of funny because, you see the heavyweights nowadays like Alexander Usyk, right? I mean, he's got a vision of like coming in at like 220 pounds or something when he makes his heavyweight debut. And St. Gordon, he was fighting a significant, I don't want to say significantly bigger man, but clearly a bigger man in Trevor Berbick, and came in at 203 and looked lean, and his stamina was good and everything. And I ended up watching this fight before we came on air.
Yeah, this is Berbick before he won a portion of the title by beating Pinklon Thomas too.
Yeah, you're right. Well, one thing I can say about Berbick is he didn't show up in this one. I mean, I don't think that he prepared that well, and I actually think he was surprised by how good St. Gordon was. Gordon is one of those guys who flies under the radar. I mean, that's because
cruiserweights did. Carlos
exactly.
De Leon, Marvin Camel, we've talked about them before. They were all good fighters, and the fight that I remember the most with St. Gordon was he's fighting against Jerry Cooney. Do you ever see that one?
No, I haven't.
Well, nothing happened. But I literally, nothing happened. He just held on to Cooney until they finally stopped the fight. And he was fighting at 187. I think Cooney was like 219. But ST was a talented guy because after that he fought Eddie the Animal Lopez. You've heard of Eddie, haven't you?
Sure.
Yeah, Eddie was a damn good fighter. He lost a unanimous decision to Eddie. And then as a cruiserweight, if you look at him, he fought, I think it was Yaki Lopez. He beat Yaki Lopez. He beat Carlos Sugar de Leon for the WBC title. He defended the WBC title against Jesse Burnett. So he's the cruiserweight champion. He moves up and fights Trevor Berbick, goes up over 200 pounds, beats Berbick by unanimous decision. And then even though he beat Berbick as a top 10 heavyweight, he drops back down to defend his title against Carlos De Leon, who he loses to on a 10-round unanimous decision. Wonder if the bouncing the weight up and down had anything to do with that.
Yeah, maybe a Roy Jones Jr. thing. I
don't think so, because it was only
I don't
like
think so
9 pounds he had to lose. I was actually just making fun of Roy.
Yeah, and not only that, De Leon was a pretty damn good fighter, but to St. Gordon's credit, again, he's not a guy a lot of people are familiar with. Cruiserweight's not a glamour division. A lot of people never followed it, but he was a pretty damn good fighter. I mean, to stop De Leon as quickly as he did, I think it was a third round stoppage.
Second round.
Okay, second round.
I remember watching that fight. That was on the undercard of something.
Dude, he beat De Leon's ass.
King things. Yeah.
He beat his ass. Yeah. I mean, I remember the stoppage because I was looking through some De Leon stuff a while back. He beat De Leon's ass. I mean, he landed a bunch of right hand shots, and you could tell that he was a puncher. Actually, going into the Berbick fight, they had some of the pre-fight analysis going on, and they were talking about how he was the biggest puncher in the cruiserweight division, and you could see it. I mean, the man could whack. And when he watched the fight with Berbick, I think Berbick I don't think Berbick trained properly for the fight. It's a bit easier to tell with heavyweights. He just wasn't as tight as he looked against other guys. But I think he was also a little bit. I don't want to say intimidated, but a little weary of St. Gordon's power. Gordon clipped him with, I think it was a left hook in the second round, and Berbick felt it, and he did a little, his feet did a little shake. And after that, I mean, he just didn't look as if he just didn't engage that much. And it was.
How about this? Because I remember rumors back in '83 that somehow Berbick said that he was sick, but I heard a lot of people talk that possibly Berbick had been doped. And St. Gordon, I think his career was controlled by Don King, as was Trevor Berbick.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, none of it would surprise me. I mean, with
crazier things have happened.
Oh, yes, they have. Again, we've talked about this shit before. There have been all sorts of things that have happened in boxing that none of us will ever know. None of us.
Yeah. St. Gordon beat Yaki Lopez. You beat Yaki Lopez. You did something. Yaki Lopez was a tough son of a bitch. Same thing with beating. I mean, when you beat Yaki Lopez, Carlos De Leon, Jesse Burnett, Trevor Berbick in 4 straight fights, you're pretty damn good. Now, I know Jesse Burnett was 25-15, but I think in his defense, I think like 14 of those 15 losses were in title fights.
Yeah, he got that many shots, huh?
I'm serious. Jesse Burnett was always getting a title shot.
Was he controlled by Don King too?
Everything was controlled by Don King in the 70s and 80s. Come on. He fought Miguel Coelho for the WBC light heavyweight title and got knocked out. He won the awesome California state title. He lost to Jerry DeBoll Martin. That was a title eliminator. We love those. He actually beat Victor Galindez in a non-title fight. Lost to Bash Ali by a split decision. That was for a cruiserweight title. Lost to Leon Spinks for an NABF cruiserweight title. Lost to St. Gordon. And then his last fight, he lost to Anthony Davis for the vacant NABF title. So.
Yeah, and Anthony Davis is the guy that Evander Holyfield beat in like his, 5th fight? I mean, and Davis ended up...
It wasn't real deep into his career because I think Davis was like ranked at that time.
He was in the top 10.
Yeah, but he fought Holyfield. I think Holyfield was 7-0 when he stopped Davis. And before that, he had lost by TKO to Bash Ali. But the interesting, if you remember Elijah Tillery, who had the 2 crazy fights with Riddick Bowe, actually for a NABF cruiserweight title, Anthony Davis had beaten him. Anthony Davis beat Jesse Burnett, as we just said, and he fought for the world title against Carlos De Leon and lost a unanimous decision, and that was, I think, a close decision. Now, this was Don King controlled Carlos De Leon, so I think the fight was like 115, 113. I think the judges all had it like 118, 112. We know how that works.
Yep, over and over again, wash, rinse, and repeat. But yeah, St. Gordon, man, it's like when I watched this fight with Berbick, he looked a little stunned in the second round, but he just didn't look like he showed up. I mean, he had the typical heavyweight footwork where he was plodding, he would come forward, he wouldn't do a whole lot. But what stunned me the most about Berbick's performance is how when he got St. Gordon on the ropes and you were like, okay, well, he's the bigger man, he's going to rough him up, he's going to bang to the body. He did it. Now, he did a little bit of that early on, but really he just laid on him most of the time after the third round. He just laid on him. He didn't do anything at all. And St. Gordon looked I loved his attitude because he didn't look scared of Berbick at all. In fact, I think Berbick complained about a rabbit punch. He was kind of being a little punk in that fight, but he complained about a rabbit punch, which wasn't all that bad. in between one of the rounds. I think it was after round 4. Again, I could be mistaken. And then he complained near the end of round, what was it, 5 or something, about a rabbit punch too. And St. Gordon was just he was started talking to him. I mean, nobody said. None of the announcers said what Gordon was saying, but he was obviously really damn confident that he could beat Berbick and that Berbick wasn't doing anything. And Gordon, when he decided to let his hands go, because Berbick was being he was kind of rough in there. He wasn't really punching effectively, but he was kind of rough where he was pushing Gordon a lot. He was leaning on him a lot. But, in terms of what he was doing at a distance, it was just virtually nothing. It was a jab here, a jab there.
The thing that was always interesting me with Berbick was sometimes he looked really good, other times he didn't. But if you look at his career, I think it started off with Bernardo Mercado. I don't know if you've ever seen him or not, but at one point he was the number 1 ranked heavyweight in the world, and he basically smashed Trevor Berbick. And Berbick was brought in to be the guy that John Tate recovered from. Remember, John Tate got knocked out by Mike Weaver. And the thing that still makes me wonder here is that Tate-Weaver fight was at the start of 1980, like February or March. John Tate goes to Montreal Olympic Stadium and fights Trevor Berbick on the undercard of Duran Leonard like 2 months later, after being knocked completely out with 15 seconds left in the fight, almost having the fight won. And then they put him in against Trevor Berbick, and he's whipping Berbick's ass because John Tate had a lot of talent, but he couldn't take a punch. And Berbick hit him, and once again, Tate goes down face first off the canvas. He comes back. He gets a shot against Larry Holmes. He gave Holmes a good run, and then he fights Muhammad Ali, who he beats by a decision. And then the big one here is 1982 on the undercard, which we'll get to talk Holmes-Cooney here in about 2 weeks. The undercard of Holmes-Cooney, Trevor Berbick comes out of nowhere and gives Greg Page his first ever loss. And then you think, well, this guy's got it going. 4 months later, though, he fights Ronaldo Snipes and loses. Then he fights St. Gordon and loses. He fights a bunch of nondescript guys. And then he beats David Bay in 1985. He beats Mitch Blood Green. He gets a title shot against Pinklon Thomas. Nobody thinks he's got a chance. And he beats Pinklon Thomas to become a WBC heavyweight champion. They feed him to Mike Tyson. That's pretty much it from there. But even after that, you go 88. He lost a unanimous decision to Carl the Truth Williams. I think that was the undercard of Tyson Spinks. And he also, a year before Buster Douglas beat Mike Tyson, lost a unanimous decision to Buster Douglas. But, I mean, he's a guy that his career spanned forever. He lost a unanimous decision to Hakeem Rockman in 1996. And he actually beat Iran Barkley in 1999.
Jeez, Iran Barkley, huh? Yep. No, I that is one thing that I remembered about Barkley is that he did end up moving way up in. Yeah, he did.
He beat Harry Coetzee, remember?
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Like 1997 or 98, because I videotaped that fight. It's a terrible fight.
Yeah, well, I can imagine. I mean, Iran Barkley at 168 was a good fight. Yeah, 160, 168 was a pretty damn good fighter, but he just didn't look like one of those guys who would translate well above that. He looked like one of those guys who had to have some of his size, to work in his favor to get it done. But, I mean, anyways, I mean, I was never that impressed with Berbick, to be honest with you. I mean, he looked like he was in good shape from time to time.
He was a solid, strong guy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was never really that impressed with his technique. I mean, it seemed like he had some heavy punches, but technically he wasn't that good. In fact, again, to the St. Gordon fight, St. Gordon, to me, threw significantly better punches technically, and he was a sharper puncher than Berbick was. Berbick just kind of looked like it wasn't all arm, but it wasn't what you would teach in a gym either. But yeah, he just, his jab and his defense, none of it really looked, I don't know. I was just never that impressed by the guy.
All right, Jeremiah, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. We do want to bring up that there will be a fight night on our Facebook channel tonight at midnight where Larry Holmes will defend his heavyweight title against Tim Witherspoon. Me and Jeremiah got $100 bet on this. I'm picking Holmes by decision.
I'm taking Witherspoon, man.
But watch the fight. Maybe Jeremiah will be on there. Maybe I'll pop in. I got to go pick my son up from work first. But also, tomorrow night at midnight, we will have Frank the Animal Fletcher against Clint the Sheriff Jackson. This was a great fight from, I think it was around 1982 or 83. They were both top 10 contenders for the USBA Championship. And then tomorrow night at 9 o'clock, you'll be able to watch live on our Facebook channel, Muhammad Ali versus Ken Norton, the third fight from New York City. It's an hour and a half long. The picture quality on it's beautiful, so make sure you go to our Facebook page, check those out. Make sure you download our app on iTunes. Make sure you rate and like us on iTunes. And you can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Jeremiah Pricer, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.